I mostly read public domain books here on Glenn Reads Books to You, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist, or sexist, or bigoted, but in there somewhere is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist, but they might have adult language or adult situations, like, making sex. So that's your warning, but I'm sure you're grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. Last Christmas story. I can't wait to get this little idiot out of my house for me. Hello. Oh, you're here. Why don't you sit yourself down? I'm going to read you one last Christmas story before we call it a done deal for the year. So welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a mansion and not just recording in my basement. This is where I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week, we're going to read Beasley's Christmas Party by Booth Tarkington. Want to learn about the author? I hope so, because I took all this time to steal all this information from Wikipedia, like I do every episode. Newton Booth Tarkington was born July 29th, 1869, and died May 19th, 1946. He was an American novelist and dramatist, best known for his novels, The Magnificent Ambersons, which I had to look up. I'll get to that later. And Alice Adams in 1921. He is one of only 4 novelists to win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction more than once, along with William Faulkner, John Updike, Colson Whitehead. In the 1910s and 1920s, he was considered the United States' greatest living author. Several of his stories were adapted to film. During the first quarter of the 20th century, Tarkington, along with Meredith Nicholson, George Add, James Whitcomb Riley, helped to create a golden age of literature in Indiana. So he served one term in the Indiana House of Representatives and was critical of the advent of automobiles. Well, that plays into my next thing. Fun fact, The Magnificent Ambersons, a book that I've not read, but I've always kind of wanted to, was turned into a movie by Orson Welles. He received a mixed response because Orson was really coming on hot off of Citizen Kane. I could do whatever I want. People, it's the war. They want to have feel-good movies, at least something with a happy ending. But instead, Orson's like, no, I want to make this about the downfall of a rich family. So, what he wound up doing is he got a mixed response from his preview audience. The film editor, Robert Wise, removed several minutes from it, but once it was previewed again, the audience's response was still, it's got a sad ending. Because Welles had conceded his original contractual right to the final cut, RKO took over editing once Welles had delivered a first cut, and then deleted more than 40 additional minutes and reshot the ending. The retakes replaced Welles' original ending with a happier one that broke significantly with the film's elegiac tone. The reshot ending is actually the same as in the novel, so now I kind of want to read the book. I watched the movie, and you can kind of see where it stops, and you can see where they reshot stuff, because suddenly nothing looks the same. The negatives for the excised portions of The Magnificent Ambersons were later destroyed in order to save vault space. A print of the rough cut was sent to Welles in Brazil, has yet to be found, and is generally considered to be lost. A documentary team led by Joshua Grossberg and backed by Turner Classic Movies planned for a search of the rough cut in September of 2021. Crap, I still got time. Oh no, the grandfather clock's coming up telling me when to shut up, and we can go down and read the book in the library. There we go. Well, why don't we go downstairs to the library and snuggle up to a little Christmas story. I'm sure you're appreciating this beautiful Christmas music, at least one last time, before, I don't know what my New Year's music's going to be like. A lot of gunshots? I don't know yet. We'll find out. But why don't you here snuggle up? You can see I've replaced the milk and cookies with eggnog. Is it eggnog, or is it just a glass of milk that I threw my phlegm into? You'll never know. Why don't you taste it? I promise you won't get sick. Well, let's start the story. Part 1. The maple-bordered street was as still as country Sunday, so quiet that there seemed an echo of my footsteps. Oh, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. Clear October moonlight misted through the thinning foliage. October is supposed to be a Christmas story. To the shadowy sidewalk and lay like a transparent silver fog upon the house of my admiration. As I strode along, returning from my first night's work on the Wainwright Morning Dispatch, that's in quotes, I had already marked that house as the finest to my taste in Wainwright, though hitherto, on my excursions to this metropolis, the state capital, I was not without a certain native jealousy that Spencerville, the country seat where I lived, had nothing so good. Now, however, I approached as peerless with pleasure and quite unalloyed, for I was at last myself a resident, albeit of only 1 day standing, of Wainwright and the house, though I had not even an idea of who lived there. Part of my passion as a citizen, moreover, I might enjoy the warmer pride of next-door neighbor, for Mrs. Apperthwaite's, that's all right, where I had taken a room, was just beyond. This was the quietest part of Wainwright. Business stopped short of it, and the fashionable residence section had overleaped this forgotten backwater, leaving it undisturbed and unchanging. With that look about it, in which the quality of a few urban quarters and eventually of none, as town grows to the big city, the look of still being in a neighborhood. This friendliness of appearance was largely the emanation of the homely and beautiful house which so greatly pleased my fancy. It might be difficult to say why I thought the quote-unquote finest house in Wainwright for a simpler structure would be hard to imagine. It was merely a big, old-fashioned brick house, painted brown and very plain, set well away from the street among some splendid forest trees, with a fair spread of flat lawn. Oh, but it gave back a great deal for your glance, just as some people do. It was a large house, as I say, yet it looked not like a mansion, but like a home, and made you wish that you had lived in it, or drive by of an evening which you would have liked to hitch your horse and go in. It spoke so surely of hearty old-fashioned people living there who would welcome you merrily. It looked like a house where there was a grandfather and a grandmother, where holidays were warmly kept, where there were boisterous family reunions to which uncles and aunts who had been born there would return from no matter what distances. A house where big turkeys would be often on the table, where one called the hired man, and named either Abner or Ole, would crack walnuts upon a flat iron clutch between his knees on the back porch. Oh, it looked like a house where they played charades, where there would be long streamers of evergreens and dozens of wreaths of holly at Christmas time. Oh, there were tearful, happy weddings and great throwings of rice after little brides. Why little brides? From the broad front steps. In a word, it was the sort of house to make hearts of spinsters and bachelors very lonely and wistful. And that is about as near as I can come to my reasoning for thinking it's the finest house in Wainwright. The moon hung kindly above its level roof in the silence of that October morning as I checked my gait to loiter along the picket fence. But suddenly the house showed a light of its own. The spurt of a match took my eye in one of the upper windows. Then a steadier glow of orange told me that the lamp was lighted. Oh, the window was open, and a man looked out and whistled loudly. Well, I stopped, thinking that he meant to attract my attention, that something might be wrong, that perhaps someone was needed to go for a doctor. My mistake was immediately evident. However, I stood in the shadow of trees bordering the sidewalk, and the man at the window had not seen me. Boy, he called softly, where are you, simple Doria? He leaned from the window, looking downward. Why, there you are, he exclaimed, and turned to address some invisible person within the room. Oh, he's right there, underneath the window. I'll bring him up. And he leaned out again. Wait there, simple Doria. What the hell is going on? I'll be down in a jiffy and let you in. Puzzled, I stared at the vacant lawn before me. That clear moonlight revealed it brightly, and it was empty of any living presence. Well, there are no bushes or shrubberies, nor even shadows. Oh, that could have been mistaken for a boy. If simple Doria was a boy, there's no dog in sight, there's no cat, and there was nothing beneath the window except thick, close-cropped grass. A light shone in the hallway beyond the broad front doors, and one of them was open and revealed in silhouette the tall, thin figure of a man in a long, old-fashioned dressing gown. Simple Doria, he said, addressing the night air with considerable severity. Well, I don't know what to make of you. You might have caught your death of cold, roving out in such an hour. But there, he continued more indulgently, wipe your feet on the mat and come in. You're safe now. He closed the door, and I heard him call to someone upstairs as he rearranged the fastenings. Simple Doria is all right, only a little chilled. Now bring him up to your fire. I'm really doing the southern accent real thick all of a sudden. I should probably drop that. I went on my way in a condition of astonishment that endangered almost a doubt in my eyes, as for my sight was unimpaired and myself not subject to optical or mental delusions. Neither boy, nor dog, nor bird, nor cat, nor any other object of this visible world had entered that open door. Was my finest house then a place to call the wanderings of ghosts who come to roost at 4 a.m? Yeah, it was only a step to Mrs. Applethwaite's, and I let myself in with the key that good lady had given me. I stole up to my room, went to my window, and stared across the yard at the house next door. The front window in the second story, I decided, necessarily belonged to that room in which the lamp had been lighted. But all was dark there now, and I went to bed and dreamed that I was out in a sea, in a fog, having embarked on a transparent vessel whose preposterous name, inscribed upon glass lifebelts, depending here and there from an invisible rail, was Simple Doria. Now there's that. Part 2. Mrs. Applethwaite's was a commodious old house, the greater part of it about the same age, I judged, as the neighbor, but the late Mr. Applethwaite had caught the mansard fever of the late 70s, and the building's disease, once fastened upon him, had never known a convalescence, but rather a series of relapses, the tokens of which, in the nature of a cupola and a couple of framed turrets, were terrifyingly apparent. These romantic misplacements seemed to me not inharmonious with the library, a cheerful and pleasantly shabby apartment downstairs, where I found, over a substratum of history, encyclopedia, and family Bible, some worn old volumes of Godfrey Lady's book, Godey's Lady's book, whatever, an early edition of Cooper's works, Scott, Bulwer, Macaulay, Byron, and Tennyson, complete, some odd volumes of Victor Hugo, of the elder Dumas, of Flaubert, Gautier, and of Balzac, Clarissa, Lalla Rookh, the Alhambra, Bellua, Uharda, Lucille, Uncle Tom's Cabin, Ben-Hur, Tribbley, She, Little Lord Fauntleroy. And of a later decade, there were novels about those delicately tangled emotions experienced by the supreme few, and stories of adventurous royalty, tales of clean-limbed young American manhood, and some thin volumes of rather precious verse. 'Twas amid these romantic scenes that I awaited the sound of the lunch bell, which for me was the announcement of breakfast. When I arose from my first night's slumbers under Mrs. Applethwaite's roof, I wondered if the books were a fair mirror of Miss Applethwaite's mind. I had been told that Mrs. Applethwaite had a daughter. Miss Applethwaite, keep saying that name over and over, herself in her youth might have sat to an illustrator of Scott or Bulwer. Even now you could see that she had come as near being romantically beautiful as she was consistently proper for such a timid, gentle little woman. She was reduced by her husband's insolvency, coincident with her demise, to keeping boarders. She did it gracefully, as the urgency therethrough were only a spirit of quiet hospitality. Oh, it should be added, in haste, that she set an excellent table. Moreover, the guests who gathered at her board were of a very attractive disposition. Oh, I was decided the instant my eye fell upon the lady who sat opposite me at lunch. I knew at once that she was Miss Applethwaite. She went so, in quotes, as they say. With her mother, nothing could have been more suitable. Mrs. Applethwaite was the kind of woman who you would expect to have a beautiful daughter, and Miss Applethwaite more than fulfilled her mother's promise. I guessed her to be more than Juliet Capulet's age, indeed, yet still between that and the perfect age of a woman. Juliet Capulet, wasn't she like 13? I thought she was like really, really young, like real young. Gross. She was of a larger, fuller, more striking type than Miss Applethwaite. A bolder type, one might put it. Though she might have been a great deal bolder than Miss Applethwaite without being bold. Okay, certainly she was handsome enough to make it difficult for a young fellow to keep from staring at her. She had an abundance of very soft dark hair, worn almost severely, as if its profusion necessitated repression, and I am compelled to admit that her fine eyes expressed a distant contemplation, obviously of habit, not of mood. So pronounced was that one of her enemies, if she had any, might have described them as dreamy. Only one other of my own sex was present at the lunch table, Mr. Dowden, an elderly lawyer and politician of whom I had heard, and to whom Mrs. Appothwaite, coming in with the rest of us, was seated, introduced me. She made the presentation general, and I had the experience of receiving a nod and a slow glance, in which there was sort of a dusky, estimating brilliance for the beautiful lady opposite me. Oh, it might have been better mannered for me to address myself as Mr. Dowden, or one of the very nice elderly women who were my fellow guests, than to open a conversation with Miss Appothwaite. Oh, but I did not stop to think of that. Yeah, splendid old house next door to you here, Miss Appothwaite, I said. Yeah, it's a privilege to find it in view of my window. Well, there was a faint stir, as if some consternation in the little company. The elderly ladies stopped talking abruptly and exchanged glances. Though this was not my observation at the moment, I think that recurred to my consciousness later, that when I perceived my blunder. May I ask who lives there? I pursued. Miss Appothwaite allowed her noticeable lashes to cover her eyes for an instant, then looked up again. Mr. Beasley, she said. Oh, not the Honorable David Beasley, I exclaimed. Yes, she returned, with a certain gravity, which I afterward wished had checked me. Do you know him? Not in person, I explained. You see, I've written a good deal about him. I was with the Spencerville Journal until a few days ago, and even in the country, we know who's in politics over the state. Beasley's the man that went to Congress and never made a speech. Never made even a motion to adjourn. But got everything his district wanted. Others talk of him now for governor. Indeed. Yeah, and so is the Honorable David Beasley, who lives in that splendid place. How curious that is. Why? Asked Mrs. Appothwaite. It seems too big for one man, I answered, and I've always had the impression Mr. Beasley was a bachelor. Yes, she said rather slowly, he is. Well, but of course he doesn't live there all alone, I supposed aloud. Probably he has there's no one else, except for a couple of, colored servants. Oh, what a crime, I exclaimed. If ever there was a house meant for a large family, well, that one is. Can't you almost hear it crying out for heaps and heaps of romping children? I should think. I was interrupted by a loud cough from Mr. Dowden, so abrupt and artificial that his intention to check the flow of my innocent prattle was embarrassingly obvious, even to me. Can you tell me, he said, leaning forward and following up the interruption as hastily as possible, what the farmers are getting for their wheat when you left Spencerville? 94 cents, I answered, and then felt my ears growing red with mortification. Too late, I remembered that the newcomer in a community should guard his tongue among the natives until he has unraveled the scheme of their relationships, alliances, feuds, and private wars. A precept not unlike the classic junction. How good is a quote? Yes, my darling daughter, hang your clothes on a hickory limb, but don't go near the water. However, in my confusion, I warmly regretted my failure to follow it and resolved not to blunder again. Mr. Dowden thanked me for the information for which he had no real desire, all the elderly ladies again taking up, with all too evident relief, their various mild debates. He inquired if I played bridge, but I forget, he added. Of course, you'll be at the dispatch office in the evenings and can't be here, after which he immediately began to question me about my work, making his determination to give me no opportunity again to mention the Honorable David Beasley, unnecessarily conspicuous, as I thought. I could only conclude that some unpleasantness had arisen between himself and Beasley, probably of political origin, since they're both in politics, and of personal and consequently bitter development. And then Mr. Dowden found the mention of Beasley not only unpleasant to himself, but a possible embarrassment to the ladies, who I supposed were aware of the quarrel on his account. After lunch, not having to report at the office immediately, I took unto myself the solace of a cigar, which kept me company during a stroll about Mrs. Appothwaite's capricious yard. And in the rear I found an old-fashioned rose garden, the bushes long since bloomless and now brown with autumn. and I paced its gravel paths up and down, and at the same time favoring Mr. Beasley's house with a covert study of what would have been done credit to a porch climber. For the sting of my blunder at the table was quiescent, at least neutralized, under the itch of a curiosity far from satisfied concerning the interesting premises next door. The gentleman in the dressing gown, I was sure, could have been no other than the Honorable David Beasley himself. Oh, he came not an eye shot now, neither he nor any other. But there's no sign of life about the place. That portion of his yard which lay behind the house was not within my vision. It is true, his property being there separated from Mrs. Apperthwaite's by a board fence higher than a tall man could reach, but there was no sound from the other side of his partition, save what caused that quiet movement of rusty leaves in the breeze. My cigar was at half length, and the green lattice door of Mrs. Apperthwaite's back porch was opened, and Mrs. Apperthwaite, bearing a saucer of milk, issued therefrom, followed hastily by a very white fat cat, with a pink ribbon around its neck, a vibrant nose, and fixed, voracious eyes uplifted to the saucer. Now the lady and her cat offered to view a group as pretty as a popular painting, and it was even improved when, stooping, Mrs. Apperthwaite set the saucer on the ground and, continuing in that posture, stroked the cat. Now it had been as far as a test of a woman's grace, I have observed. Stop staring at her, you creep. She turned her face toward me and smiled. I'm almost at that age, you see. What age? I asked, stupidly enough. When we take the cat, she said, rising. Spinsterhood, she liked to call it. Single blessedness. As your kind heart, you declined to make one of us happy to the despair of all the rest. She laughed at this, with no genuine mirth, I marked, and let my 1830 attempt at gallantry pass without other retort. Yes, seem to be interested in the place yonder, she indicated Mr. Beasley's house with a nod. Oh, I understood my blunder, I said quickly. I wish I had known the subject was embarrassing or unpleasant to Mr. Dowden. What made you think that? Well, surely, I said, you saw how pointedly he cut me off. Yes, she returned thoughtfully. He rather did, it's true. At least I see how you got that impression. He seemed to muse upon this. She seemed to muse upon this, letting her eyes fall, then, raising them, allowed her faraway gaze to rest upon the house beyond the fence, and said, It is an interesting old place. And Mr. Beasley himself, I began. Oh, she said, he isn't interesting. That's the trouble. It's trouble not to, she interrupted me, speaking with a sudden surprising energy. I mean, he's a man of no imagination. No imagination, I exclaimed. None in the world. Not 1 ounce of imagination. Not 1 grain. Then who? I cried. Or what is Simple Doria? Simple what? She said plainly, mystified. Simple Doria. Simple Doria, she repeated and laughed. What in the world is that? You never heard of it before? Never in my life. You've lived next door to Mr. Beasley a long time, haven't you? All my life. And I suppose you know him pretty well? What next? She said, smiling. Well, you said he lived there all alone, I went on tentatively, except for an old, couple, his servants. Can you tell me, I hesitated, has he ever been thought, queer? Never, she answered emphatically. Never anything so exciting, merely deadly and hopelessly commonplace. She picked up her saucer, now exceedingly empty, and set it upon a shelf by the lattice door. What is it about? What was that name? Simple Doria. Well, I'll tell you, I said, and I related in detail the singular performance of which I had been witness in the late moonlight night that morning's dawn. As I talked, we half unconsciously moved across the lawn together, finally seating ourselves upon a bench beyond the rose beds and near the high fence. The interest my companion exhibited in the narration might have surprised me had my nocturnal experience itself been less surprising. She interrupted me now and then with little half-checked ejaculations of acute wonder, but sat for the most part with her elbow on her knee and her chin in her hand, her face turned eagerly to mine and her lips parted in half-breathless attention. Well, there was nothing far away about her eyes now. They were widely and intently alert. When I finished, she shook her head slowly, as if quite dumbfounded, and altered her position, leaning against the back of the bench and gazing straight before her, without speaking. It was plain that her neighbor's extraordinary behavior had revealed a phase of his character novel enough to be startling. Well, one explanation might be just barely possible, I said. If it is the most remarkable case of somnambulism on record. Did you ever hear Mr. Beasley walking in his... She touched me lightly but permanently on the arm in warning, and I stopped. On the other side of the board fence, a dark door opened creakily, and there was the sound of a loud and cheerful voice, that of the gentleman in the dressing gown. "Here we come," it said. "Me and Big Bill Hammersley. I want to show Bill I can jump. Anyways, 3 times as far as he can. Come on, Bill." "Is that Mr. Beasley's voice?" I asked under my breath. Mr. Aperthwaite nodded in affirmation. "Could he have heard me?" "No," she whispered. "He just came out of the house." And then to herself, "Oh, who under heaven is Bill Hammersley? I never heard of him." "Of course, Bill," said the voice beyond the fence. "If you're afraid I'll beat you too badly, you still got time to back out. I did understand you to kind of hint that you were considerable of a jumper. But if what? What do you say, Bill?" There ensued a moment's complete silence. "Oh, all right." And the voice then continued, "You say you're in this to win, do you? Well, so am I, Bill Hammersley. So am I. Who'll go first? Me? All right. From the edge of the walk here. Now then, 1, 2, 3, ha!" A sound came to our ears of someone landing heavily at a full length, and it seemed on the turf, followed by a slight rusty groan in the same voice. Don't you laugh, Bill Hammersley. I haven't jumped so much as I ought to these last 20 years, I reckon. I've been kind of lost to the hang of it. There were indications that Mr. Beasley was picking himself up and brushing his trousers with his hands. Now it's your turn, Bill. What do you say? Silence again, followed by, "Yes, I'll make Simple Dora get out of the way. Come here, Simple Dora. Now, Bill, put your heels together on the edge of the sidewalk. That's right. All ready? Okay, now then, 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to make ready, and 4 to go." Another silence. "Oh, by jingo, Bill Hammersley, you beat me. Oh, that was a jump. What say?" Silence once more. "Oh, you say you can do even better than that? Well, now, Bill, don't brag. Oh, you say you've jumped farther. Oh, you say that it was up in Scotland where you had a springboard. Oh, all right. Let's see how far you can jump when you really try. There, heels on the walk again. That's right. Swing your arms. 1, 2, 3. There you go." Another silence. Zing! "Well, sir, I'll be eternally snatched to flinders if you didn't do it that time, Bill Hammersley. I never really saw any jumping before all my born days. It's 11 feet if it's an inch. What, you say?" And I heard no more, for Mrs. Aperthwaite, her face flushed and her eyes shining, beckoned me imperiously to follow her and departed so hurriedly that it might be said that she ran. "Well, I don't know," said I, keeping at her elbow, "whether it's more like Alice or the interlopers' conversation at a minstrel show." "Hush," she warned me, though we were already a safe distance, and did not speak again until we had reached the front walk. There she paused, and I noted that she was trembling, and, no doubt correctly, judged her emotion to be that of consternation. "There was no one there," she exclaimed. "He was all by himself. It was just the same as you saw last night." Evidently. "But did it sound to you," like it's a little odd tremor in her voice, I found very appealing. "Did it sound to you like a person who lost his mind?" "Well, I don't know," I said. "I don't know all what it takes to make of it." "Well, he couldn't have been." Her eyes grew very wide. "Intoxicated." "No, I'm sure it wasn't that." "Then I don't know what to make of it either." All that wild talk about Bill Hammersley and Simple Dora and springboards in Scotland and an 11-foot jump, I suggested. "Why, there's no more Bill Hammersley," she cried with a gesture of excited emphasis, "than there is a Simple Dora." "So it appears," I agreed. "Well, he's lived there all alone," she said solemnly, "and in that big house, so long, just sitting there, evening after evening, all by himself, never going out, never reading anything, not even thinking, but just sitting and sitting. Well," she broke off suddenly, shook the frown from her forehead, and made me the offer of a dazzling smile. "There's no use us bothering one's own head about it." "Well, I'm glad to have a fellow witness," I said. "It's so eerie I might have concluded there was something the matter with me." You gonna go to work?" she asked as I turned toward the gate. "I'm very glad I don't have to go to mine." Yours?" I inquired rather blankly. "I teach algebra and plain geometry at the high school," said this surprising young woman. "Thank heaven it's Saturday. I'm reading Les Miserables for the 7th time, and I'm going to have a real orgy over Gervais and the barricade this afternoon. Okay, well, part 3, that's a good place to stop. Why don't we, I don't know, quaint little story. Why don't we head down to the basement where we can, I don't know, learn about some other kind of book you could read. And I could play my guitar for you. It's nice down there. It's really dry up here. We don't have any humidity in this house. But if you go down to the basement, oh, it's real wet. It's real wet down there. And so we can get all nice and moist, and I can play the guitar and tell you about a new upcoming book from Penguin Random House. Well, there you are. You finally made it down here. Take a seat in this folding chair while I play this guitar for you from once underneath this naked light bulb. Yeah, it's moist and drippy. It's part of the charm. There's a new book out from Penguin Random House called Watch Your Back by Karen Rose. It's part of the Baltimore series, which I guess we're supposed to be familiar with. You want to hear about Watch Your Back? Sure you do. When a cold case is reopened, a murder reemerges, deadlier than ever in this thriller and a New York Times best-selling author. Burp. Kevin Rose's Baltimore series. Again, New York Times best-selling author. It's horseshit. Baltimore homicide detective Steve Mazzetti has suffered losses Stevie Mazzetti has suffered losses no woman should have to endure. And despite it all, I've never heard a woman called Stevie, so that threw me off. And despite it all, she's still a fighter. When she learns that her ex-partner may have miscarried justice, she's determined to put the past to rights, even when she becomes a target. Oh, it's a former Marine Clay Maynard's job to see the risk in every situation, but former Marine Clay Maynard. Okay, whatever. But he doesn't have to look hard to find the danger surrounding Stevie. Since the minute he first saw her, Clay was wanted to protect the wounded officer, and he started loving her not long after that. So when the Stevie attracts the attention of a vicious psychopath, Clay will do whatever it takes to keep her alive. That is, if he can stay ahead of a killer with everything to lose and something terrifying to hide. This is supposed to be a romantic book. It doesn't really sound very romantic. But either way, it's Watch Your Back by Karen Rose. It's crime fiction, suspense and thriller, and romantic suspense. All right, whatever. Yeah, you get it paperback February 4th. You get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Bookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, Powell's, Target, and honestly, if you saw this book, you wouldn't really look twice at it. It kind of looks like any book you can get at a grocery store. It just says Karen Rose at the top. It's kind of got a woman's face with some sort of sunset in the background, and her face is ghosted over it. There's like a pier. It just says Watch Your Back. It looks like one of those kind of books you're like, it's like a Danielle Steele. It's just like one of a million. Hey, so you'd see it, maybe. You'd probably be thinking of something else as you walk by. Even if you look right at the cover, you're probably thinking about like, I don't know, what other kind of crap you got to get before Christmas from Walmart. Well, with that, why don't we go back upstairs and finish the rest of this story. Well, there you go. You're back. Don't you feel nice and wet? I bet you do. I do. God, I love the basement. Well, let's keep reading the rest of this book. I don't know why I decided to have the commercial happen so soon, because there is a lot left to this story. This Christmas story. Burp, Part 3. I do not know why it should have astonished me to find that Miss Apthwaite was a teacher of mathematics, except that, to my inexperienced eye, she didn't look it. She looked more like Charlotte Corday. Let's look up Charlotte Corday. Search on Wikipedia. Marianne Charlotte de Corday Dumont, 1768 to 1793, known as Charlotte Corday, French, whatever that is, was a figure of the French Revolution who assassinated revolutionary and Jacobin leader Jean-Paul Marat on 13th of July. Okay, well, that's a very specific reference. I had the pleasure of seeing her opposite me at lunch the next day when Mr. Dowden kept me occupied with Spencerville politics, obviously for fear that I would break out again. But no stroll in the yard with her rewarded me afterward. I dimly hoped, for she disappeared before I left the table, and I did not see her again for a fortnight. On weekdays, she did not return to the house for lunch. My only meal at Mrs. Appothwaite's, I dined at a restaurant near Dispatch Office, and she was out of town for a little visit. Her mother informed us over the following Saturday and Sunday. She was not altogether out of my thoughts. However, indeed, she almost divided them with the Honorable David Beasley. A better view which I was afforded of this gentleman did not lessen my interest in him, increased it rather. It also served to make extraordinary... Oh, God, that was a close one. Didos? Let's look up Didos. The queen and founder of Carthage who fell in love with the shipwrecked... Oh, my God, are you serious? I will tell you, I thought it was an apparatus used mainly by women, sometimes by men who enjoyed pegging, of which he had been the virtuoso, and I, the audience, more than ever profoundly inexplicable. My glimpse of him in the lighted doorway had given me the vaguest impression of his appearance, but one afternoon, a few days after my interview with Mrs. Appothwaite, I was starting for the office and met him full face on as he was turning in his gate. I took as careful invoice of him as I could without conspicuously glaring. Oh, there was something remarkably taking, as we say, about this man. Something easy and genial and quizzical and careless. He was the kind of person you like, in all caps, to meet on the street, whose cheerful passing sends you on a feeling indefinably a little gay. It's late. I still haven't gone to Germany yet. I'm just kind of preloading a lot of episodes. So this episode is the night before I go to Germany, where my wife and I have decided we're going to stay up till like 2 in the morning. Then we're going to sleep till like 10 in the morning. And then we're going to get on this plane because when we land, we got to go straight to the Black Forest for the Christmas markets. And God damn it, we can't be all sleepy. So here I am with marbles in my mouth from being so goddamn tired because it's 12:30. I'm really old. Even gaunt, perhaps. His face was long, rather pale and shrewd and gentle. Something in its oddity not unremindful of the late Sol Smith Russell. That's another reference I'm not going to look up. His hat was tilted back a little, the slightest bit to one side, and the sparse, brownish hair above his high forehead was going to be gray before long. He looked about 40. The truth is, I had expected to see a cousin German to Don Quixote. God, I know that name. I'm so tired. Don Quixote. Marbles. I had thought to detect signs and gleams of wilderness, however slight. Something a little, quote, off, unquote. One glance of that kindly and humorous eye told me such an expectation had been nonsense. Odd he might have been. Gadzooks! Exclamation point. He looked it, but queer? Never. The fact that Mrs. Appothwaite could picture such a man as this sitting and sitting and sitting, in quotes, himself in any form of mania or madness, whatever spoke loudly of her own imagination. Indeed, the key to simple Dora was to be sought under some other mat. ... As I began to know some of my co-laborers... Oh, wow. I've never seen a new paragraph start with 3 dots before. That's pretty new. Some of my co-laborers on the Dispatch, and to pick up acquaintances here and there about town. I sometimes made Mr. Beasley the subject of inquiry. Everyone knew him. Oh, yes, I know Dave Beasley, would come the reply, nearly always with a chuckling sort of laugh. I gathered that he had the name for easygoing, which accounted for the eccentricity. It was said that what the ward healers and camp followers got out of him in campaign times made the political managers cry. He was the finest and readiest prey for every fraud and swindler that came to Wainwright. I heard, and yet, in spite of this, and of that hatred of speech-making, in parentheses, and then quotes, he's as silent as Grant, said one informant. He had a large practice, and he was one of the most successful lawyers in the state. One story they told of him, or they were more apt to put it on him, was repeated so often that I saw it had become one of the town's traditions. One bitter evening in February, they related, he was approached upon the street by a ragged, whining, and shivering old reprobate, notorious for the various ingenuities by which he had worn out his patience with the charity organizations. He asked Beasley for a dime. Beasley had no money in his pockets, but gave the man his overcoat and went home without any himself and spent 6 weeks in bed with a bad case of pneumonia as a direct result. His beneficiary sold the overcoat and invested the proceeds in a 5-day spree in the closing scenes of which the brickbats were featured to high spectacular effect. One he sent through a jeweler's show window in an attempt to intimidate some unholy imaginary pursuers, and the other he projected at a perfectly actual policeman who was endeavoring to soothe him. The victim of Beasley's charity and the officer were then borne to the hospital in company. He was due in part to recollections of legend and others of similar character that people laughed when they said, "Oh, yes, I know Dave Beasley," in all caps. Altogether, I should say, Beasley was about the most popular man in Wainwright. I would discover nowhere anything, however, to shed the faintest light upon the mystery of Bill Hammersley and Simple Doria. There's not until the Sunday of Miss Apperthwaite's absence that the revelation came. That afternoon, I went to call upon the widow of a second cousin of mine. She lived in a cottage not far from Mr. Apperthwaite, upon the same street. And I felt, this is like the smallest world on earth. This guy's got everything, just like within 5 blocks. I found her sitting on a pleasant veranda with boxes of flowering plants along the railing. Through Indian summer was now close upon departure. I feel like Indian summer is probably racist. Should we look it up? Let's look it up. I'm sure we're going to find out an unusually dry, warm weather occurring in late autumn. Yeah, I know what that is. It just seems weird. I remember hearing about that when I was a kid, and even as a child, I'm like, I feel like I shouldn't say that. Well, it's now close upon departure. She was rocking meditatively and held a finger in a Morocco volume. Apparently a verse, though I suspected that she had been better entertained in the observation of the people and vehicles decorously passing along the sunlit thoroughfare within her view. We exchanged inevitable questions and news of mutual relatives, and I had told her how I liked my work and what I thought of Wainwright, and she was congratulating me upon having found so pleasant a place to live as Mrs. Apperthwaite's, and then she interrupted herself to smile and nod, a cordial greeting to 2 gentlemen driving by in a phaeton. They waved their hats to her gaily, and then leaned back comfortably against the cushions, as if 2 men were obviously and inconstantly the best of terms with each other. These, in all caps, 2 were, they were David Beasley and Mr. Dowden. I do wish, said my cousin, resuming her rocking, I do wish dear David Beasley would get a new trap of some kind. That old phaeton of his is a disgrace. I suppose you've met him? Of course, living in Mrs. Apperthwaite's, you wouldn't be apt to. But what's he doing, Mr. Dowden? I asked. Well, she lifted her eyebrows. Why, taking him for a drive, I suppose. No. I mean, how do they happen to be together? Why shouldn't they be? They're old friends. They are. And in answer to the look of surprise, I explained that I began to speak of Beasley at Mrs. Apperthwaite's and described the abruptness in which Dowden had changed the subject. I see, my cousin nodded comprehendingly. Well, that's simple enough. George Dowden didn't want you to talk of Beasley there. I suppose it may have been a little embarrassing for everyone, especially if Anne Apperthwaite heard you. Anne? That's Miss Apperthwaite? Yes, I was speaking directly to her. Why shouldn't she have heard me? She talked of him herself a little later, and at some length, too. She did! My cousin stopped rocking and fixed me with her glittering eye. Well, of all... Is it so surprising? The lady gave her boat the waves again. Anne Apperthwaite thinks about him still, she said with something like vindictiveness. I've always suspected it, and thought that you were new to the place and didn't know anything about it all, or anybody to mention it to. That's it. I'm still new to the place, I urge, and I still don't know anything about it at all. Oh, they used to be engaged, was her succinct and empathetic answer. I found it a bit too illuminating. Oh, I cried. I was an innocent, wasn't I? Well, I'm glad she does think of him, said my cousin. It serves her right. I only hope he won't find it out, because he's a poor, faithful creature. He'd jump at the chance to take her back, but she doesn't deserve him. Well, how long has it been, I asked, since they used to be engaged? A good while, 5-6 years ago, I think, maybe more. Time skips along. Anne Appothwaite's no chicken, you know, such was the lady's expression. They got engaged just after she came from college, and all the idiot-alecky, is that a word? I'm really looking up a lot of stuff tonight. I'm so tired. Idiot-alecky. I don't think it's a real word. All right, fine. Just means a stupid person. We already knew that. I just don't think it exists as a real word. Can you just do that? I guess you can. Shakespeare did. Just make up your own words. Stupid alecky. There, I did it right now. The romantic girls. But she's a teacher, I interrupted, of mathematics. Yes, she nodded wisely. Yeah, I always thought that explained it. The romance is a reaction from the algebra. And I never knew a person connected with mathematics or astronomy or statistics or some sort of exact things who didn't have a crazy streak in them. Somewhere, in all caps, they've got to blow off steam and be foolish to make up for putting in so much of their time and hard sense. Oh, but don't you think that I dislike Anne Appothwaite? She's basically just equating the same thing as like librarians. Oh, they're nasty, those librarians. Oh, they look so uptight, but they're so nasty. Don't you think I dislike Anne Appothwaite? She's always been one of my best friends. That's why I feel at liberty to abuse her. And I always will abuse her when I think she's treated poor David Beasley. How did she treat him? Well, she threw him out in the clear sky one night, that's all. Just sent him home and broke his heart. That is, it would have been broken if he had any kind of disposition except for the one Lord blessed him with. Just all optimism and cheerfulness, and make the best of it-ness. Ugh, she's never cared for anybody else, and I guess he never will. What'd she do it for? Nothing! My cousin shot the indignant word out of her lips. Nothing in the whole wide world. Oh, there must have been. Listen to me, she interrupted, and tell me if you ever heard anything queer in your life. Well, they'd been engaged, heaven knows how long, over 2 years, probably near 3, and always she kept putting it off. Wouldn't begin to get ready, wouldn't set a day for the wedding. Then Mrs. Appothwaite died, and left her and her mother, or Mr. Appothwaite died, left her and her mother stranded high and dry with nothing to live on. David had everything in the world to give her, and still she wouldn't. And then, one day, she came up here and told me she'd broken it off, said she couldn't stand it to be engaged to David Beasley another minute. But why? Because, my cousin's tone was shrill with despair of expressing the satire she had to put it to, because she said he was a man of no imagination. Yeah, she still says so, I remarked thoughtfully. Well, then it was time she got a little imagination herself, snapped my companion. David Beasley's the quietest man God has made, but everyone knows what it is. Oh, there's some rare people in this world that aren't all talk, in all caps. Oh, there's still some rather rarer ones that scarcely ever talk at all, and David Beasley's one of them. Now, I don't know whether it's because he can't talk or because he hates to. I only know that he doesn't, and I'm glad of it. Oh, I thank the Lord he's put a few like that into this talky world. David Beasley's smile is better than acres of other people's talk. My providence! Wouldn't anybody, just to look at him, know what he does better than talk? He thinks. Oh, the trouble with Anne Appothwaite is that she's too young to see it. Oh, she's so full of novels and poetry and dreaminess and highfalutin nonsense. She couldn't see anything. Oh, it's really what it was. Oh, she'd study her mirror and see such a heroine of romance there that she just couldn't bear to have a fiancé who had any chance of turning out to be the crown prince of Kenosha in disguise. And at the very least, to suit her, he'd have to wear a well-trimmed Van Dyke and coo sonnets in the gloaming, or read on a balcony to her by a red lamp. Poor David. Outside of his law books, I don't believe he's ever read anything but Robinson Crusoe and the Bible and Mark Twain. Oh, you should have heard her talk about it. I couldn't bear it another day, she said. I couldn't stand it. And all the time I've known him, I don't believe he's ever asked me a single question except when he asked me if I'd marry him. He never says anything. He never speaks at all, she said. You don't know a blessing when you see it, I told her. Blessings, she said. There's nothing in the man. He's got no depths. He doesn't have any more imagination than his chair, and he sits and sits and sits. And half the time he answers what I say to him by nodding and saying, with that same old foolish, contented smile of his, and I'd have gone mad if it had lasted any longer. I asked her if she thought married life consisted very largely of conversations between husband and wife, and she answered that even married life ought to have had some poetry in it, some romance, she said, some soul. And she just comes and sits and said, he sits and sits and sits, and I can't bear it any longer, and I've told him so. Poor Mr. Beasley, I said. I think poor Aunt Aperthwaite, retorted my cousin. I'd like to know if there's anything nicer than just to sit and sit and sit with as lovely a man as that. A man who understands things and thinks and listens and smiles instead of everlastingly talking. As it happens, I remarked, I heard Mr. Beasley talk. Why, of course he talks, she returned. And there's any real use in it. He talks to children. He's that kind of man. I meant a particular instance, I began, meaning to see if she could give me any clue into Bill Hammersley and Simple Doria, but at the moment the gate clicked under the hand of another caller. My cousin rose to greet him, and presently I took my leave without having been able to get back upon the subject of Beasley. Thus, once more baffled, I returned to Mrs. Aperthwaite's, and within the hour came into full possession of the very heart of that dark and subtle mystery which overhung the house next door, and so perplexed my soul. Okay, part 4. I should probably wait for the music to start again. It kind of ruins the effect. There we go. Finding I still had some leisure before me, I got a book from my room and repaired to the bench in the garden. But I did not read. I had but opened the book when my attention was arrested by the sounds from some other side of the high fence, low and tremulous croonings of distinctly African duration. What? Oh, boy, I am not reading that. Oh, that is really not good. Well, I'm not going to read whatever the hell that's supposed to be. Let's just say it's very unflattering. It was the voice of an aged... Not reading that word, and the simultaneous slight creaking of a small hub and axle seemed to indicate that he was pushing or pulling a child's wagon or perambulator up and down the walk from the kitchen door to the stable. Whilst he preferred soothing music over and over, he repeated the chant through with variations, encountering in turn his brother, his daughter, each of his parents, his uncle, his cousin, or second cousin, one after the ascending the same slope at the same perilous leisure. Lay still, honey, he interrupted his injections with the second cousin. Oh, God, I don't want to read that either. Can I clean this up? Just keep on napping and breathing the fresh air. I can't read that last line without just saying... That's what go make you... Oh, it's going to make you well again. My God, this is horrible. Why does this have to be in the middle of the book? Then there spoke the strangest voice that ever fell upon my ear. It was not like a child's, neither was it like a very old person's voice. It might have been a grasshopper's. Oh, it was so thin and little, and made of such tiny wavers and quivers and creakings. I want, said this elfin voice, I want Bill Hammersley. Oh, God. Oh, is it Beasley pretending to be a baby? The shabby phaeton which had passed by my cousin's house was drawing up to the curb near Beasley's gate. Evidently, the old man saw it. It's the bad word again. Hi there, he exclaimed. I'm totally not reading what they wrote here. Look at that. It's Bill coming yonder. And exactly on the dot to the very spot, I think when... Oh, my God, this is so hard to read. Honey, They come, Miss Dave, right on the minute. I hate this. Come along, honey child. It's go to pull you round in the side. I can't read the rest. This is ridiculous. I refuse to read it as he wrote it. It's super, super insulting. The small wagon creaked away, the chant resuming as it went. Mr. Dowden jumped out of the phaeton with a wave of his hand to the driver, Beasley himself, oh, so it's not Beasley in the crypt, who clucked to the horse and drove through his open carriage gates and drove down the drive to the other side of the house, where he was lost to my view. Dowden, entering our gate, nodded in a friendly fashion to me, and I advanced to meet him. "Someday, I want to take you over next door," he said cordially as I came up. "You ought to know Beasley, especially as I hear you're doing some political reporting. Dave Beasley's going to be the next governor of this state, you know." He laughed and offered me a cigar, and we sat down together on the front steps. From all I hear," I rejoined, "you ought to know who'll get it." It was said in town that Dowden would come pretty near having a nomination in his pocket. "Well, I expect you thought I shifted the subject pretty briskly the other day." He glanced at me quizzically from under the brim. I'm starting to think the author had something similar like this happen in his life, and so he's going to write about it, because he will not shut up about it. He glanced at me quizzically from under his brim of his black felt hat. "I meant to tell you about that, but the opportunity didn't occur, you see." "I understand," I interrupted. "I heard the story. You thought it might be embarrassing to Miss Aperthwaite." "No, I expect I was pretty clumsy about it," said Dowden cheerfully. Well, he flicked his cigar with a smothered ejaculation. There was half a sigh and half a laugh. "Oh, it's a mighty strange case. Here they keep on living next door to each other, year after year, each going on alone when they might just as well—" He left the sentence unfinished, save for a vocal click of compassion. "Well, they bow when they happen to meet. Oh, but they haven't exchanged a word since the night she sent him away long ago." He shook his head, then his countenance cleared and chuckled. "Well, sir, Dave's got something at home to keep him busy enough these days, I suspect." "Oh, you mind telling me?" I inquired. "Is its name Simple Doria?" Mr. Dowden threw back his head and laughed loudly. "Ha, Lord, no. What on earth made you think about that?" I told him it was my second success with this narrative. However, there was a difference. My former auditor listened and flushed and breathless with excitement, whereas the present one laughed consumedly throughout. Especially he laughed with a great laughter at the picture of Beasley coming down at 4 a.m. and opened the door to nothing on sea or land or the waters under the earth. I gave account also of the miraculous jumping contest, though I did not mention Miss Aperthwaite's having been with me, and of the elfin voice I just now overheard demanding Bill Hammersley. "So I expect you must have decided," he chuckled. Yeah, what I conclude, David Beasley's just gone plain plumb insane." "Not a bit of it. Nobody could look at him and not know better than that." "You're right there," said Dowden heartily. "And now I'll tell you all there is to," in all caps, "it. You see, Dave grew up with a cousin of his named Hamilton Swift. Oh, they were boys together, went to the same school, and then to college. I don't believe there's ever a high word spoken between them. Nobody in this life ever got a quarrel out of Dave Beasley. And Hamilton Swift was a mighty good sort of fellow, too. He went east to live, and they got out of college, yet they always managed to get together once a year. Generally, about Christmas time, and you wouldn't pass them on the street without hearing their laughter ringing out louder than the sleigh bells. Maybe over some old joke between them, or some fool thing they did, perhaps. They were boys. But finally, Hamilton Swift's business took him over to the other side of the water to live, and he married an English girl, an orphan, without any kin. That's about 70 years ago. Well, sir, this last summer, he and his wife were taking a trip down in Switzerland, and they were both drowned, tipped over out of a rowboat in Lake Lucerne. And the word came that Hamilton Swift's well-appointed Dave guardian to the one child they had, a little boy, Hamilton Swift. Junior's his name. He was sent across the ocean in charge of a doctor, and Dave went out to New York to meet him. And he brought him home there the very day before you passed the house and saw poor Dave getting up at 4 a.m. to let the ghost in. It's a mighty funny ghost, Simple Doria is. What? Okay, sorry, I'm going back and reading this. Like, what the hell did I just read? English girl and orphan. Okay, so it's the ghost. I began to understand, I said, and I feel pretty silly, too. Not at all, he rejoined heartily. This little chap freaks would mystify anyone, especially with Dave humoring him and ridiculous the way he does. Hamilton Swift Jr. is the curious child I ever saw, and good Lord knows he made all the children powerful mysteries. Oh, the poor little cuss has a complication of infirmities that kept him on his back most of his life, never knowing other children, never playing or anything. Oh, he's got ideas and ways that I never saw the beat of. He was born sick, as I understand it, and his bones and nerves and insides are all wrong. Jesus. Somehow, but it's supposed to get a little bit better from year to year. Oh, he wears a pretty elaborate set of braces. Oh, he's subject to attacks. I don't know the name of them. He loses what little voice he has sometimes, all but a whisper. Oh, yeah, he had one, I know, the day after Beasley brought him home, and that was probably the reason why he thought Dave was carrying on all by himself, a jumping match out of the backyard. The boy must have been lying there, a little wagon, and they have for him, while Dave cut up shines with Bill Hammersley. Of course, most children have make-believe friends and companions, especially if they haven't any brothers or sisters, but this lonely little feller's got his people worked out in his mind and materialized beyond any I've ever heard of. Dave got well acquainted with them in the train on the way home, and they certainly are giving him a lively time. Ho, getting him up at 4 a.m. Mr. Dowden's mirth overcame him for a moment, and when he had mastered it, he continued, Simple Doria. Now, where do you suppose he got that name? Well, anyway, Simple Doria is supposed to be Hamilton Swift Jr.'s St. Bernard dog. Beasley had to bathe him the other day, he told me. Bill Hammersley is supposed to be a boy of Hamilton Swift and Jr.'s own age, but very big and strong. He has rosy cheeks. Yeah, and he can do more in athletics than old college track team. That's the reason why he outjumped Dave so far, you see. Okay, that was weird. Part 5. Well, Miss Appothwaite was at home the following Saturday. I found her in the library with Les Miserables on her knee when I came down from my room a little before, lunchtime. And she looked up and gave me a smile that made me feel sorry for anyone that had ceased to smile upon. I want to tell you, I said with a little awkwardness, but plenty of truth, I found out, that I'm an awful fool. Well, but that's something, she returned encouragingly, at least the beginning of wisdom. I mean about Mr. Beasley, the mystery I was absurd enough to find in Simple Doria. I want to tell you. Oh, I know, she said, although she laughed with an effect of carelessness, to look, which I thought, far away, returned in her eyes as she spoke. There was a certain inscrutability about Mrs. Appothwaite sometimes. It should be added that she did not like to be too easily read. I've heard all about it. Mr. Beasley's been appointed trustee or something of poor Hamilton Swift's son. A pitiful little invalid boy, oh Lord, who invents all sorts of characters. Oh, the old darky, oh God, from over there told our cook about Bill Hammersley and Simple Doria. So, you see, I understand. Well, I'm glad you do, I said. A little hardness, one might even have thought it bitterness, it became so apparent in her expression, and I am glad there's some, all caps, buddy, in that house at last with a little imagination. I'm starting to just hate this woman. From everything I've heard, I returned, summoning sufficient boldness, it would be difficult to say which has more, Mr. Beasley or a child. Her glance fell from mine at this, but not quickly enough to conceal a sudden half-hearted look of trouble. Oh, I could think of no other way to express it, and then leapt into it, and as she rose, for the lunch bell was ringing. Well, I'm just finishing the death of Jean Valjean, in Les Miserables, she said, as we moved to the door. I'm always afraid I'll cry over that. I try not to, because it makes my eyes red. And in truth, there was a vague rumor of tears about her eyes, not if she had shed them, but more as if she were going to, though I had not noticed it when I came in. That afternoon, when I reached the dispatch office, I was commissioned to obtain certain political information from the Honorable David Beasley, an assignment I accepted with eagerness, notwithstanding the commiseration it brought me from one or two of my fellows in the reporter's room. "Oh, you won't get anything out of him," they said, and they were true prophets. I found him looking over some documents in his office, a reflective, unlighted cigar in the corner of his mouth, his chair tilted back, and his feet on a window sill. He nodded upon my statement of the affair that brought me, and without shifting his position, gave me a look of slow but wholly friendly scrutiny over his shoulder. He bade me sit down, and I began at once to put questions, but I was told to ask him interrogations, he seemed to believe, satisfactorily answered by slowly and ruminatively stroking the left side of his chin with two long fingers, gross, on his right hand. Nothing grosser than long, skinny fingers. And while he smiled in genial contemplation of the tarred roof beyond the window, now and then he would give me a mild and drawling word or two, not brilliantly illuminative, but maybe he remarked, "Well, about that," he began at once, and came immediately to a full stop. "Yes," I said, hopefully, my pencil poised. About that, I guess. Yes, Mr. Beasley," I encouraged him, for he seemed to have dried up permanently. "Well, sir, I guess, hadn't you better see someone else about that," in all caps? Oh, this with the air of a man who would be but too fluent and copious upon any subject in the world except the one particular point. I never met anybody else who looked so pleasantly communicative and managed to say so little. In fact, he didn't say anything at all. And I get, he's starting to learn to hate this guy, just like that woman did. And I guess that this faculty was not without its value in his political career. Disastrous as it had proved to be, his ultimate happiness, his habit of silence, moreover, was not cultivated. You could see that the, quote, secret of it, unquote, burp, was just that he was born quiet. My notebook remained noteless. And finally, at some odd evasion of this, accomplished by a monosyllable, I laughed outright, and he did too. He joined cachinations. I'm not going to look it up, with me heart-heartedly, and with a twinkling quizzicalness, and somehow gave me the idea that he might be thinking, rather apologetically, to himself, "Yes, sir, that old Beasley man is certainly a mighty funny critter." When I went away a few moments later and left him still intermittently chuckling, an impression remained with me that I hate it when people do that he had some depreciatory and supertuitous thought. 2 or 3 days after that, as I started downtown from Mrs. Appothwaite's, Beasley came out of his gate, bound in the same direction. He gave me a look of gay recognition and offered his hand, saying, "Well, up in this neighborhood," as if it were a matter of considerable astonishment, and I mentioned that I was a neighbor. We walked on together, and I don't think he spoke again except for, "Well, sir," or too genial surprise at something I said, and now and then, "Oh, you don't tell me," which he had a most eloquent way of exclaiming, and he listened visibly to my own talk and laughed at everything that I meant to be for funny. I never knew anyone who gave one a greater responsiveness. He seemed to be with, in all caps, you every instant, and, quote, all caps, how he made you feel. That it was a true mystery of Beasley. This silent man who never talked except, as my cousin said, to children. It happened that I thus met him as we were both starting downtown and walked with him several days in succession. In a word, it became a habit. Then, one afternoon, as I turned to leave at the dispatch office, he asked me if I wouldn't drop in at his house the next day for a cigar before we started. I did. And he asked me if I wouldn't come again the day after that. And so this became a habit, too. A fortnight elapsed before I met Hamilton Swift, Jr., for he, poor little father of dreamlike children, could be no spectator of track events upon the lawn, but lay in his bed upstairs. However, he grew better at last, and my presentation took place. We had just finished our cigars in Beasley's airy, old-fashioned sitting room, and we were rising to go, and then there came a faint creaking of small wheels from the hall, and Beasley turned to me with an apologetic and monosyllabic chuckle that was distinctively his tone. "Oh, yeah, got a little chap here," he said, and then went to the door. "Bob!" The old, Darky. It's a Christmas story. Why do you gotta, talk crap about black people in a Christmas story? I had to go through that whole thing where this poor character, it's like he's talking and isn't it funny how black people talk? I hate this book. It's horrible. The old, appeared in the doorway pushing a little wagon like a reclining chair on wheels, and in it sat Hamilton Swift Jr. My first impression of him was that he was all eyes. Oh, don't do it. I couldn't look at anything else for a time, and he was hardly conscious of the rest of that weazened, peak little face and the undersized wisp of a body with its pathetic adjuncts of a metal and leather. All right, whatever. I think there was the brightest eyes I ever saw, just as keen and as intelligent as a wicked old woman's, with all as thrustful and cheery as the eyes of a setter pup. He's a human being. Hooray! Thus the Honorable Mr. Beasley, waving a handkerchief thrice around his head and thrice cheering, and the child in the cricket's voice of his replied, "Bravo!" That's BR-R-RA-VO. So that my little tongue rolling was apt. This was the form of salutation formerly in use between them. Beasley followed it by inquiring, "Who's with us today?" "I'm Mr. Swift," chirped the little fellow. "Mr. in all caps Swift, if you please, Cousin David Beasley." Beasley executed a formal bow. "There is a gentleman here who would like to meet you," and he presented me with some grave phrases, commentary of my general character, addressing the child as Mr. Swift, whereupon Mr. Swift gave me a ghostly little hand and professed himself glad to meet me. "Oh, and besides me," he added to Beasley, "there's Bill Hammersley and Mr. Corley Linbridge." Well, a faint perplexity manifested itself upon Beasley's face at this a shadow which cleared at once when I asked if I might not be permitted to meet these personages, remarking that I had heard from Dowden to Bill Hammersley, although until now a stranger to the fame of Mr. Corley Linbridge. Beasley performed the ceremony with intentional elegance, where the boy's great eyes swept glowingly from his cousin's face to mine and back again. And I bowed and shook hands with the air, once to my left and once to my right. "And Simple Doria," cried Mr. Swift. "Oh, you'll enjoy Simple Doria." "Above all things," I said. "Can he shake hands?" "Some dogs can." "Watch him." Mr. Swift lifted a commanding finger. "Simple Doria, shake hands." And I knelt beside the wagon and shook the imaginary big paw. So is anything real here? I guess the poor black guy, he's pulling a wagon. There's a real child in the wagon, right? I'm getting confused. At this, Mr. Swift again shook hands with me and allowed me to perceive in his luminous regard a solemn commendation and approval. In this wise was my intimidation to the beautiful old house and the cordiality of its inmates completed, and I became a familiar of David Beasley and his ward, with the privilege to come as I pleased. There was always gay and friendly welcome, and I always came for the cigar after lunch. Sometimes for lunch itself, sometimes I dined there instead of going downtown, and now, and it happened that an errand or an assignment took me away in the afternoon, I would run in and visit, in quotes, a while at the Hamilton Swift Jr. and his circle of friends. Now, there were days, of course, when his attacks were upon him, and only Beasley and the doctor and old Bob saw him. I did not know what the boy's mental condition was at times, but when he was better, he could be wheeled about the house and again receive callers. Oh, so the other child's real. And he displayed an almost dismaying activity of mind. Always an active enough, certainly, to keep far ahead of my own, and he was masterful. Still, Beasley and Dowden and I were never directly chidden for insubordination. Let's look up chidden. Chided. Oh, okay, so just being scolded. Whatever. Chidden doesn't seem like a real word, though made to wince painfully by the look of troubled surprise that met us as we were not quick enough to catch his meaning. The order of the day with him always began with hooray and bravo, again with the dashes and the R's, of greeting, after which we were to inquire, who's with us today? Whereupon he would make known the character in which he elected to be received for the occasion. If he announced himself as Mr. Swift, everything was to be grown up and decorous indeed. Formalities and distances were observed, and Mr. Corley Linbridge, an elderly personage of great dignity and distinction as ever a mountain climber, was much oftener inclined in the conversation than Bill Hammersley. If, however, he declared himself to be Hamilton Swift, Jr., which was his happiest mood, Bill Hammersley and Simple Doria were in the ascendant, and there were games and contests. Dowden, Beasley, and I all slid down the banisters on one of Hamilton Swift Jr.'s days, all of which really picturesque spectacle. Boy almost cried with laughter. And old Bob and his wife, who came running from the kitchen, did cry. And a third appellation for himself, just little Hamilton. But this was only when the creaky voice could hardly chirp at all, and the weazened face was drawn to one side with suffering. When he told us he was just little Hamilton, we were quiet. Once, for 10 days, the Invisibles all went away on a visit. Hamilton Swift Jr. And had become interested in bears. While this lasted, all of Beasley's trousers were, as Dowden said, a sight. For that matter, Dowden himself was quite hoarse in accord from the growling so much, the bears were dismissed abruptly. Bill Hammersley and Mr. Corley Linbridge and Simple Doria came trooping back, and with them they brought that wonderful family, the Hunchbergs. Sorry, I skipped pages. There we go. Beasley had just opened the front door, returning at noon from his office when Hamilton Swift Jr.'s voice came piping from the library, where he was reclining in his wagon by the window. Cousin David Beasley! Oh, Cousin David, come a-runnin', he cried. Come a-runnin', the Hunchbergs are here. Of course, Cousin David Beasley came a-runnin' and was immediately introduced to the whole Hunchberg family. A ceremony where old Bob, who was with the boy, had previously undergone with courtly grace. Oh, they like Bob, explained Hamilton. Don't you, Mr. Hunchberg? Yes, he says, they do extremely. Are the Hunchbergs real? I don't know what's going on anymore. He used such words as extremely very often. Indeed, as Dowden said, he talked like a child in a book, which is due, I dare say, to his English mother. And I'm sure, the boy went on, that all the family will admire Cousin David. Yes, Mr. Hunchberg says he thinks they will. And then, as Bob told me, he went almost out of his head with joy when Beasley offered Mr. Hunchberg a cigar and struck a match for him to light it. But whar! Exclaimed the old darky. God damn it. Oh no, again, he's talking and it's going to be an offensive, this is what black people sound like speech. Whar in the name, oh, the good God, do the child get them names? He liked to scare me. Oh, he liked to scare me. God, I hate this. That was the subject often debated between Dowden and me. Why write a Christmas story where it's like, it'd be fun in this Christmas story? Let me try to phonetically write out how I think black people talk. And keep using the word darky all the time. God, this is horrible. That was the subject often debated between Dowden and me. I'm not trying to put on a show. It's just like, even back in 1830, you were reading a Christmas story. It's like, now here's a comical bit where I try to write out how I think black people talk. It's not good no matter what time you're in. This is so bad. That was a subject often debated between Dowden and me. Well, there was nothing in Wainwright that could have suggested them. It did not seem probable that he could have remembered them from far over the water. In my opinion, they were inventions of that busty and lonely little brain. I met the Hunchberg family myself that day after their arrival, and Beasley by that time had become so well acquainted with them that he could remember all their names and helped in the introductions. There was Mr. Hunchberg, evidently the child's favorite, for he was described as a professor of every engaging virtue. Oh, and there was that lively matron, Mrs. Hunchberg. Oh, and there were the Hunchberg young gentlemen, Tom, and Noble, and Grandy, and the young ladies, Miss Queen, Miss Marble, and Miss Moana, all exceedingly gay and pretty. Oh, and there was Colonel Hunchberg and Uncle. Finally, there was Aunt Cooley Hunchberg, a somewhat decrepit but very amiable old lady. And Mr. Corley Lindbergh happened to be calling at the same time, and it appeared to be Beasley's duty to keep the conversation going and constantly to include all the party's general flow. It struck me that he had truly, as Dowden said, enough to keep them busy. I'm still not sure if the Hunchbergs are real people. The Hunchbergs had lately moved to Wainwright from Constantinople. Yeah, they're probably not real people. I learned that they decided not to live in town, however, having purchased a fine farm out in the country. And on account of the distance, were able to call at Beasley's only about, 8 times a day, and seldom more than twice in the evening. Whenever a mystic telephone announced that they were on the way, the child would have himself wheeled to a window, and then when they came in sight, he would cry out in wild delight, while Beasley hastened to open the front door to admit them. Now they are so real to the child. Oh, so they're not real. They were so real to the child that Beasley treated them with such constant seriousness, and that between the two of them, sometimes I began to feel they were actually such real people, to have moments of half surprise that I couldn't see them, particularly as such the Hunchbergs developed a character, and thank God he's clarifying they're not real, entirely of their own. I'm sure they said it at some point in the beginning, but it's becoming a giant soup of bullshit. I'm still upset about the black people, and on which account Beasley never once forgot to raise his voice when he addressed her. Indeed, the details of actuality and all this appeared to bring as great a delight to man as to the child. Certainly, he built them up with infinite care. On one occasion, when Mr. Hunchberg and I happened to be calling, Hamilton remarked with surprise that Simple Doria had come into the room without licking his hand, as he usually did, and had crept under the table. Mr. Hunchberg volunteered the information through Beasley that upon his approach to the house he had seen Simple Doria chasing a cat. They debated whether chastisement was in order, but finally decided Simple Doria's surreptitious manner of entrance and his hiding under the table were sufficient indication that he well understood his baseness and would never let it happen again. And so Beasley, having coaxed him out from under the table, the offender sat up, begged, and was forgiven. I could almost feel the splendid shaggy head under my hand when, in turn, I patted Simple Doria to show that the reconciliation was unanimous. Oh my God, part 6. I want this story to fucking end. I mean, I get it. I get that the woman doesn't like him because he has no imagination. Now he has an abundance of imagination. Plus, he's a nice guy because he's adopted this kid in a wheelchair. And so she's going to fall in love with him. Is that the point of the Christmas story? He's going to throw a Christmas party and she's going to see that he's got all these imaginary people. And then she's going to be like, I'm going to put down my copy of Les Miserables and I'm going to finally enjoy this imaginative, silent man. I hate this story. Part 6, Autumn trailed the last leaves behind her flying brown robes one night, and we woke to a scurry of snow the next morning. It was winter. Downtown, along the sidewalks, the merchants set lines of poles, covered them with evergreen, and ran streamers of green overhead to encourage the festival shopping. Salvation Army Santa Clauses stamped their feet and rang bells on corners. Pig-faced children fixed their noses immovably to display windows, and for them, the season of seasons, the time of times, was at hand. He just basically described capitalism. To a certain new reporter on the Dispatch, the stir and gaiety of the streets meant little more than that of the days had come when at night and the afternoon, and that they was given fewer political assignments. This was annoying because Beasley's candidacy for the governorship had given me a personal interest in the political situation. The nominating convention of his party would meet in the spring. Say what party it is. The nomination was certain to carry the election also, and thus far Beasley Beasley showed more strength than any other man in the field. Things looking his way, said Dowden. Oh, he's always worked hard for the party. Which party? Down on the stump, of course. Oh, he laughed. Yeah. The boys understand there are more important things than speech making. Oh, his record in Congress gave him the confidence of everyone in the state. And besides that, people always trust a quiet man. Oh, I'll tell you, if nothing happens, he'll get it. I'm for Beasley, another politician explained in an interview, because he's Dave Beasley. Yes, sir, I'm for, in all caps, is F-E-R, him. Oh, you know the boys say if a man is only for, and that's all caps, F-O-R, you in this state, oh, there isn't much in it and may go back on it. But if he's for, I hate this, you, he means it. Well, I'm for Beasley. There were other candidates, of course, none of them formidable, but I was surprised to learn of the existence of a small, energetic faction opposing our friend in Wayneswright, in his own town. What are you surprised about? Inquired Dowden. Don't you think that our folks are like, yet? If St. Paul lived in Wainwright, do you suppose he would run for constable without some of his near neighbors getting out to try him downtown? All right, whatever. The head and the front, and the backbone, too, of the opposition to Beasley was a close-fisted, hard-knuckled, risen-from-the-soil sort of man, one named Simon Peck. He possessed no inconsiderable influence, I heard. He's a hard worker and vigorously seconded by an energetic lieutenant, a young man named Grist. These, and the others, had been able to draw to their faction, were bitterly and eagerly opposed to Beasley's nomination, and worked without ceasing to prevent it. I quote the invaluable Mr. Dowden again. Grist's against us, because he had a quarrel with the clerk in Beasley's office, and he wanted Beasley to discharge him, and Beasley wouldn't. Sim Peck's against us, he's just plain wrong-headedness, and because it was never for anything, never for anyone in his life. I had a talk with the old muttonhead the other day, and he said our candidate ought to be a farmer, a man of the common people. And when I asked him where he'd find anybody more man of the common people than Beasley, he said Beasley was too much of a society man to suit him. And the idea of Dave as a society man was too much for me, and I laughed in Sim Peck's face. But that didn't stop Sim Peck. Oh, just look at the style he lives in, he yelled. Ain't he fairly lapped in luxury? Oh, look at that big house he lives in. Oh, look at the way he goes around that Phaeton of his, huh? Oh, my God, the N-word, just a flat-out N-word. And an N-word to drive him half the time. My eyes got real big when I saw that. It just leapt out at me from the page. God damn. To drive him half the time. I had to holler again, and of course, that made Sim twice as mad as he started out to be, and he went off swearing how he'd show me before the campaign was over. The only trouble he and Grist and the crowd would give us would be by finding out something against Dave, and they couldn't do that because there isn't anything to find out. I shared his confidence on the latter score, but was somewhat less sanguine on some of the others. Oh, there were only two newspapers of a political influence in Wainwright, the Dispatch, and the Journal. Both operated in the interest of Beasley's party. Which party? And neither had come out for him. Oh, the gossip I heard around our office led me to think that each was waiting to see what headway Sim Peck and his faction would make. Oh, the Journal especially, I knew, had some inclination to coquette with Peck, Gist, and company. Altogether, their faction was not entirely despised. What does this have to do with Christmas? Thus, my thoughts were a great deal more occupied with Beasley's chances than with the holiday spirit that now, with furs and bells and wreathing mists of snow, breathed good cheer over the town. So little, indeed, had this spirit touched me that one evening when one of my colleagues, standing before the great fire in the reporter's room, yawned and said he'd be glad when tomorrow was over, I asked him what was the particular trouble with tomorrow. Christmas, he explained languidly. Always so tedious, like Sunday. It makes me homesick, said another melancholy little man who was forever bragging of his native Duluth. Really? Duluth, Minnesota? I know this author knows of Minnesota. Would he actually include a place like Duluth? Christmas, I repeated. Tomorrow. It was Christmas Eve. And I had not known it. I leaned back in my chair in sudden loneliness. Ah, what pictures coming before me of long ago Christmas Eves at home! Exclamation point. Old Christmas Eves, when there was a tree. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dots. My name was called. The night city editor had an assignment for me. Go up to Sim Peck's on Madison Street, he said. He thinks he's got something on David Beasley, but won't say any more over telephone. See what there is in it. Well, I picked up my hat and coat, left the office at a speed which must have been giving my superior the highest conception of my journalistic zeal. At a telephone station on the next corner, I called up Mrs. Apthwaite and asked for Dowden. Hey, what are you doing? I demanded, when his voice responded. Playing bridge, he answered. Going out anywhere? No. What's the trouble? I'll tell you later. I may want to see you before I go back to the office. All right, I'll be here all evening. Oh, he's playing the middleman. Oh, he's like a spy. I hung up the receiver and made off on my errand. Downtown? The streets are crowded with the package-laden people, bending heads and shoulders to the bitter wind, which swept the building, sleet like snow, horizontally against them. In at corners it struck so tumultuous, a blow upon the chest of the pedestrians, that for a moment it would halt them, and you could hear them gasping, half-smothered ahs, like bathers in a heavy surf. Yet there was a gaiety in this eager gale. The crowds pressed anxiously, yet happily up and down the street in their generous search for things to give away. Oh, it was not the rich who struggled through the storm tonight. Oh, these were people who carried their own bundles home. You saw them, toilers and savers, tired mothers and fathers, worn with the grinding thrift of the year. But now, for this one night, careless of how hard saved the money, reckless of everything but joy of giving it to bring the children joy of the one great tomorrow. So they bent their heads to the freezing wind, all their arms laden with daring bundles, all their hearts uplifted with the tremulous happiness of giving more than they could afford. Meanwhile, Mr. Simon Peck, honest man that had chosen the season to... I should wait for the music. To work harm if he might to the gentlest of his fellow men. I found Mr. Peck waiting for me at this house. Well, there were 4 other men with him. One for whom I recognized as Grist, a squat young man with slippery-looking black hair and a lambrequin mustache. I'm not looking that up. Oh, they were donning their coats and hats in the hall when I arrived. For the dispatch. Hey, Mr. Peck gave me as a greeting as he wound a knit comforter about his neck. Now that's good. We'd most give you up. Oh, here is Mr. Grist, Mr. Henry P. Cullen, and Mr. Gus Schulmeyer. Oh, 3 men that feel the same way about Dave Beasley that I do. The other young feller, he waved a mittened hand to the 4th man. He's from the Journal. Likely you're acquainted. The young man from the quote-unquote Journal was unknown to me. Moreover, I was far from overjoyed at his presence. I got you newspaper men here, continued Mr. Peck, because I'm going to show you something about David Beasley that'll open a good many folks' eyes when it's in print. Oh, boy. It's going to be something like homosexuality. Back then, they would have killed you. Oh, wait, what is it? I asked rather sharply. Just hold your horses for a little bit, he retorted. Grist and me knows. And so do Dr. Cullen and Dr. Schulmeyer. And I'm going to take them, and your reporter's going to look at it. All ready? Oh, then come on. He threw open a door and stooped to the Gus that took him by the throat and led the way into the store. What is he up to? I gasped to the Journal man as we followed in a straggling line. Well, I don't know any more than you do, he returned. He thinks he's got something that'll queer Beasley. Peck's an old fool, but it's not possible to get a hold of something. Nearly everyone has one thing, at least, that they don't want found out. Oh, it may be a good story. Lord, what a night. I pushed ahead to the leader's side. "Look here, Mr. Peck," I began, but he cut me off. "Oh, you listen to me, young man. I'm giving you some news for your paper, and I'm getting it in my own way, and I'll get at," in all caps, "it. Oh, don't you worry. I'm going to let some folks around here know what kind of feller David Beasley really is. Yes, I'm going to show George Dowden he can't laugh at me." "You're going to show Mr. Dowden?" I said. You're going to take him on his expedition, too?" "Take him?" Mr. Peck emitted an acrid bark of laughter. "Yeah, I guess he is at Beasley's, all right." No, he isn't. He's at home. Mrs. Apperthwaite's playing cards." "What?" "I happen to know that he'll be there all evening." Oh, Mr. Peck smote his palms together. "Grist," he called over his shoulder. And the colleague struggled forward. "Listen to this. Even Dowden ain't at Beasley's. Ain't the Lord working for us tonight? Why don't you take Dowden with you?" I urged, "if there's anything you want to show him." "By George, I will," shouted Peck, "and I got him where the hair is short now." Doesn't that mean pubic hairs? The short hairs? I always thought that meant, all right. "Well, that's right," said Grist. "Gentlemen," Peck turned to the others, "when we get to Mrs. Apperthwaite's, just stop outside along the fence a minute, and I reckon we'll pick up a recruit." Shivering, we took up our way again in single file, stumbling through the drifts that had deepened incredibly within the hour. Oh, the wind was straight against us, and so stingingly sharp and so laden with the driving snow that when we reached Mrs. Apperthwaite's gate, which we approached from the north, not passing Beasley's, my eyes were so full of smarting tears that I could only see blurred panes of light dancing vaguely in the darkness instead of brightly lit windows. "Now," said Peck, panting, and turning his back to the wind, "the rest of you gentlemen, wait out here, and you two newspaper boys, you come with me." He opened the gate, and we went in, the, quote, journal reporter and I following. All three of us wiping our half-blinded eyes. When we reached the shelter of the front porch, I took the key from my pocket and opened the door. "I live here," I explained to Mr. Peck. "Nah, all right," he said. "Just step in and tell George Dowden that Sim Peck's out here and wants to see him at the door in a minute. Be quick." I went to the library, and there sat Dowden contemplatively playing bridge with two of the elderly ladies, and Mrs. Apperthwaite, the last mentioned person, quite took my breath away. In honor of the Christmas Eve, I suppose, she wore an evening dress of black lace. Is that like a Christmas Eve outfit? And the only word for what she looked suffered such misuse that one hesitates over it. Yet, that it is what is regal, and no less. There was a sort of splendor about her. It detracted nothing from this that her expression was a little sad. Something not uncommon with her lately, a certain melancholy, faint, but detectable, like breath on a mirror. I had attributed it to Jean Valian, though perhaps tonight it may be due merely to bridge. "What is it?" asked Dowden, when after an apology for disturbing the game I had drawn him out into the hall. I motioned toward the door. "Simon Peck. He thinks he's got something on Beasley. He's waiting to see you." Oh, Dowden uttered a sharp, half-coherent exclamation and stepped quickly to the door. "Peck," he said as he jerked it open. "I'm here," declared the gentleman, stepping into view. "I've come around to let you know that you couldn't laugh like a horse at me no more, George Dowden, so you weren't invited either." "Invited?" said Dowden. "Where?" "Over to the ball your friend is giving." "What friend?" "Dave Beasley. So he ain't quite good enough to dance with his high society friends. What are you talking about?" Dowden demanded impatiently. "I reckon you won't be quite so strong for Beasley," I responded back with a vindictive little giggle. Yeah, when you find that he can use you in his business, but when it comes to entertaining, oh no, you ain't quite the boy." "I'd appreciate your explaining," said Dowden. "It's kind of cold standing here." Peck laughed shrilly. Yeah. That's my best shrill laugh. "Then I reckon you better get your hat and coat and come along. You can't do us no harm. You might be an eye-opener for you, Grist, and Gus Schulmeyer, and Hank Collops waiting out yonder at the gate. We've been having a kind of consultation at my house over something Grist seen at Beasley's a little earlier in the evening. What did Grist see? Hacks! Driving up to Beasley's house. Oh, a whole lot of them. Grist was down the street a piece. It was pretty dark, but you could see the lamps, you hear the doors slam as people got out. Besides, the whole place was lit up from ceiling to attic. Oh, Grist came out of my house. He told me all about it, and I begun using the telephone. And I called up all the men that count in all caps in the party. What party? Found most of them at home, too. I asked them if they'd been invited to this ball tonight, and not a one of them was there. Oh, they're only on politics. They ain't high society. Enough to be asked to Beasley's dancing parties. I guess I have to give this person credit. It's not as offensive as when he tries to do a phonetic spelling of how a black person talks. Now it's just kind of like a white trash person, and it's kind of mildly phonetic. But still, it's not as bad as the other one. But I would have thought he'd let you in. Anyways, for the second table, Mr. Peck shrilled out his acrid and exultant laugh again. Yeah, I got these fellers from the newspapers, and all I want is to get this here ball to print tomorrow and see what the boys that do the work, the primaries, have to say about it, and what their wives will say about the man who's too high-toned to have them in his house. And I'll bet Beasley thought he was going to keep these doing quiet, afraid of the farmers might not believe he's just the man, plain enough, he sets up to be. Afraid that folks like you that ain't invited might turn against him. I'll fool them. Oh, they're going to see what he is going to see, and I'm going to have these boys from the newspapers write a full account of it. And if you want to come along, I expect it'll do you a power o' good. I'll go, said Dowden quickly. He got his coat and hat from the table hall. He joined the huddle from the shivering group at the gate. Got Mercoot, gents, shoved Peck, slapping his Dowden boisterously on the shoulders. Yeah, I reckon I get a change of heart tonight. And now, sheltering my eyes from the stinging wind, I saw that I had been too blind to see as we approached Mrs. Appothwaite's. Beasley's house was illuminated. Every window upstairs and down was aglow with rosy light. Oh, that was illuminated, evident through the shades were lowered. Oh, look at that, said Peck to Dowden, giggling and trifling. Yeah, I tell you, how you feel about it now? Oh, but where are the hacks? Asked Dowden gravely. Folks all come, answered Mr. Peck with a complete assurance. Won't be no more hacks till they begin to go home. We plunged ahead as far as the corner of Beasley's fence, where Peck stopped again, and we drew together, slapping our hands, stamping our feet. Peck was delighted. Oh, a thoroughly happy man. His sour giggle and exultation had become continuous. What does that sound like? Yeah. Just continuously going in the background. And the same jovial break was audible in Grist's voice as he said to the quote-unquote journal reporter and me, "Go ahead, boys. Get your story. We'll wait here for you." I'll wait for the music. Come on. There we go. The journal reporter started toward the gate, as he had gone perhaps 20 feet when Simon Peck whistled in a sharp warning. And the reporter stopped short in his tracks. Beasley's front door was thrown open, and there stood Beasley himself in evening dress, bowing and smiling. But not at us, for he did not see us. The bright hall behind him was beautiful with evergreen streamers and wreaths and great flowering plants in jars. Oh, a strain of dance music wandered out to us as the door opened, but there was nobody except David Beasley in sight, which certainly seemed peculiar. For a ball! Exclamation point. The rest of them inside dancing, explained Mr. Peck, crouching behind the picket fence, and I'll bet the house is more than half full of those low-necked women. W-I-M-M-I-N. Shh, said Gist. Listen. Beasley had begun to speak, and his voice, loud and clear, sounded over the wind. Come right in, Colonel, he said. I'd have sent a carriage for you if you hadn't telephoned me this afternoon that your rheumatism was so bad you didn't expect to be able to come. And I'm glad you're well again. Yes, they're all here. The ladies are getting up a quadrille in the sitting room. Getting up a quadrille? I'm looking that one up. Square dance performed typically by 4 couples. All right, whatever. Oh, it was in this moment that I received upon the craft the right leg a kick, an ecstatic violence, which led me to attribute it to Mr. Dowden. Gentleman's dressing room upstairs to the right, Colonel, called Beasley as he closed the door. Oh, there was a pause of awed silence among us. I improved it by returning the kick to Mr. Dowden, and when he made no acknowledgement of his reputation other than to sink his chin a little deeper into the collar of his ulster. By the Almighty, said Simon Peck hoarsely. Who, what, in all caps, was David Beasley talking to? Oh, there wasn't nobody, all caps, there. Get out, Gis bade him. His tone was perturbed. He had seen the reporter. It was giving us a laugh. He's crazy, claimed Peck vehemently. Immediately, all 4 members of his party began to talk at the same time. Oh, Mr. Schumacher agreeing with Gist, and Mr. Cullip holding with Peck that Beasley had surely become insane, while the journal man returning was certain that he had not been seen. Argument became a wrangle, excitement over the remarkable scene which he has witnessed, and perhaps a certain sharpness, partially engendered by the risk of freezing, led to some bitterness. High words were flung upon the wind. Eventually Simon Peck got on the floor to himself for a moment. See here, boys, there's no use getting mad amongst ourselves, he vociferated. Oh, one thing we're all agreed upon, nobody here has never seen no such damn particular performance as we just seen our whole lives before. Therefore, capital THUR, then lowercase FORE, ball or no ball, there's something mighty wrong about this business. Ain't that so? They said it was. And then there's only one thing to do. Let's find out what it is. Oh, you bet we will. I wouldn't send no one there alone, Peck went on excitedly. With the crazy man? Besides, I want to see what's going on myself. So do we. Yeah, this was unanimous. Well, let's see if there ain't some way to do it. Perhaps he ain't pulled the shades down to some other side of the house. Oh, lots of people forget to do that. There was but one in mind, and the party regarded the proposal. The next minute saw us all cautiously sneaking into the side yard, a ragged line of bent and flapping figures, black against the snow. Simon Peck's expectations were fulfilled, more than fulfilled. Not only were all the shades of the big 3-faced bay windows of the sitting room, in all quotes, lifted, but evidently on account of the too great generosity of the huge log fire that blazed in the old-fashioned chimney place, one of the windows was half raised as well. Here, in the shadow just beyond the rosy oblongs of light that fell upon the snow, we gathered and looked freely within. All part of the room was clear to our view, though about half of it was shut off for the very king of all Christmas trees, glittering, with dozens and dozens of candles. Oh, sumptuous in silver, sparkling in gold, and laden with heaven alone knows how many and what delectable enticements. Opposite the tree, the back against the wall, sat old Bob, clad in a dress of state, part of which consisted of a swallowtail coat, which is an overgrown chrysanthemum, burp in the buttonhole, a red necktie, and a pink and silver Liberty cap, tissue paper. He is scraping a fiddle. Like old times come again. And the tune he played was, Oh, My Liza Poe Gal. Don't know what that is, don't know how to say it that way. My feet shuffled into it in the snow. But no one except old Bob was to be seen in the room. But we watched him and listened breathlessly. When he finished, Liza, he laid the fiddle across his knee and wiped his face with a new and brilliant blue silk handkerchief and said, now come the big speech. Honorable David Beasley, carrying a small mahogany table, stepped out from beyond the Christmas tree, advanced to the center of the room, set the table down, disappeared for a moment, and returned with a white water pitcher and a glass. I placed these upon a table, bowed gracefully several times, then spoke. Ladies and gentlemen. There he paused. Well, said Simon Peck slowly, this don't beat hell. Look out, said the journal reporter, twitched his sleeve. Ladies present. Where? Said I. He leaned nearer to me and spoke in a low tone. Just behind us. She followed us over from your boarding house. She's been standing around near us all along. I suppose she was Dowden's daughter? Probably. He hasn't a daughter, I said, and stepped back to the hooded figure I had been too absorbed in our quest to notice. It was Miss Appothwaite. She had thrown a loose cloak over her head and shoulders, but enveloped in it she was, encrusted with encapsulated with the white. Oh, I knew her at once. There's no mistaking her. Even in the blizzard, she caught my hand, and with a strong, quick pressure, and bending her head towards mine, said, close to my ear, I heard everything that man said in our hallway. You left the library door open when you called Mr. Dowden out. So, I returned meticulously, you couldn't help following? Well, she released my hand, gently to my surprise. Hush, she whispered. He's saying something. Ladies and gentlemen, said Beasley again and stopped again. Dowden's voice sounded hysterically in my right ear. Oh, Miss Appothwaite had whispered my left. The speech he's ever made in his life, and he's stuck. But Beasley's wasn't. He was only deliberating. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, Mr. and Mrs. Hunchberg, Colonel Hunchberg and Aunt Cooley Hunchberg, Miss Mulliana and Miss Queen, Miss Marble, Miss Marble Hunchberg, Mr. Noble, Mr. Tom, Mr. Grandee Hunchberg, Mr. Corley Linbridge, and Master Hammersley. I see before you tonight my person. Merely the representative of your real host, Mr. Swift. Mr. Swift has expressed a wish that there should be a speech, and he is deputed to me to make it. Now he requests that the subject that he has assigned me should be treated in a dignified a manner as possible. Considering the order, ladies and gentlemen, he took a sip of water, I will now address you upon the following subject. Why we call Christmas time the best time? Christmas time is the best time because it is the kindest. Well, nobody ever felt very happy without feeling very kind, and nobody ever felt very kind without feeling a little happy. Yeah. So, of course, either way about that, the happiest time is the kindest time, and that is this time. The most beautiful things our eyes can see are the stars. And for that reason, in that remembrance of one star, we set candles on the tree to be the stars in our house. So we make Christmas time a time of stars, indoors. Oh, and they shine warmly against cold outdoors. That is like the cold of other seasons, not so kind. So we set our 100 candles on the tree and keep them bright throughout the Christmas time. For while they shine upon us, we have light to see this life, not as a battle, but as a march of a mighty fellowship. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. He bowed right, then he bowed left, as to an audience politely applauding, and lifting the table and its burden, withdrew. While old Bob again set his fill on his chin and scraped the preliminary measures of a quadrille. Beasley was back in an instant, shouting his game, take your partners, balance all. And then there, all by himself, he danced a quadrille, performing at one and the same time for 4 lively couples. Never in my life have I seen such gyrations and capers as were cut by the long-legged, loose-jointed, meticulously flying figure. Oh, he's the wildest motion without cessation, never the fraction of an instant still, calling the figures at the top of his voice and dancing them simultaneously, his expression anxious but polite, as the habit of other dancers, his hands extended as if to swing his partner, or corner, or opposite lady, and his feet lifted high and flapping down, an old-fashioned step. First, forward and back, he shouted, forward and salute, balance to corners, swing partners, grand the bunch of R's, right and left. I think the combination of abandon and decorum with which he performed the grand right and left was the funniest thing I'd ever seen, but I didn't laugh at it. Neither did Mrs. Appothwaite. Oh, she's fallen in love with him. He's going to lose his bid to be in whatever political party they won't say he is. But now Mrs. Appothwaite's falling in love. Now, do you believe me? Peck was arguing fiercely with Mrs. Schulmeyer. Is he crazy or ain't he? He is, Grist agreed hoarsely. Oh, he's a stark roaring lunatic. Oh, God, and the N-word's humor in him. I hate this. There they all were, staring, open-mouthed and aghast at the lighted room. And do you see where it puts us? Simon Peck's rasping voice rose high. Yeah, I guess I do, said Grist. We come out to buy a barn, and we got a house and a lot for the same money, and it's the greatest night you ever worked on, Sim Peck. I guess it is. Shake it on, Sim. Well, they shook hands, exalted with triumph. Well, this'll do the work, giggled Peck. That's about 2,000%. Better than a story we started to get. Why, Dave Beasley will be in the padded cell in a month, eh? Yeah, and he'll be all over town tomorrow, and he'll have as much chance for governor as that N-word in there. God, I hate this book. In his ecstasy, he smote Dowden deliriously in the ribs. What do you think you're candidate now? Wait, said Dowden, who came in the backs of that grist saw. Staggered Mr. Peck, and he rubbed his mitten over his woolen cap as if scratching his head. Why, he said slowly, who in Halifax did come in through them hacks? The Hunchbergs, said I. Who's the Hunchbergs? Where? Listen, said Dowden. First couple, face out, shouted Beasley, facing out with an invisible lady on his akimboed arm, while old Bob sawed madly at a new coon in town. I'm sure that's racist, too. Second couple, fall in, Beasley wheeled about and enacted the second couple. Third couple, he fell behind himself again. Fourth couple, if you please, balance all. I beg your pardon, Miss Moliana, I'm afraid I stepped on your train. Sachet all. After the sachet, the noblest and most dashing bit of gymnastics played the whole quadrille. Oh, he bowed profoundly to his invisible partner and came to a pause, wiping his streaming face. Old Bob dexterously swung a new coon into the stately measures of triumphal march. I feel like, all right, whatever. I'm sure it's more racism that I'm being tricked into saying, because I don't understand the reference of a new coon. Okay, fine, whatever. And now Beasley announced the stentorian tones. If the ladies will be so kind as to take the gentleman's arms, we will proceed to the dining room and partake of a slight collation. Thereupon came a slender piping of joy from that part of the room screened from us by the tree. Oh, Cousin David Beasley, that was the beautifulest quadrille ever danced in the entire world. And please, won't you take Miss Hunchberg out to supper? Yeah. Then into the vision of our paralyzed and dumbfounded watchers came a little wagon, pulled by the old colored woman, Bob's wife. God, poor Bob. In her best, and there, propped upon pillows, lay Hamilton Swift, Jr., his soul shining rapture out of his great eyes, a bright spot of color on each of his thin cheeks. He lifted himself on one elbow, and for an instant, something seemed to be wrong with the brace under his chin. Beasley sprang to him and adjusted tenderly. Then he bowed elaborately toward the mantelpiece. Mrs. Hunchberg, he said, may I have the honor? And then offered his arm. And I must have Mr. Hunchberg, chirped Hamilton. He must walk with me. He tells me, said Beasley, he'll be mighty glad to. And there's a plate of bones for simple Doria. Oh, you'll lead the way, cried the child. You and Mrs. Hunchberg. Are we all in line? Beasley glanced over his shoulder. Hooray! Now, let us on. Who? There. Bravo! Applauded Mr. Swift. And Beasley, his head thrown back and his chest out, proudly led the way, stepping nobly and in time to the accelerating measures. Hamilton Swift, Jr., towed by the beaming old mammy, followed in his wagon, his thin little arm uplifted, his fingers curled as if they held a trusted hand. Then they reached the door, and old Bob Rose turned in after them, and still fiddling, played the procession of himself down the hall. And so they marched away, and were left staring into the empty room. My soul, said the journal reporter, gasping. And he did all that just to please a sick little kid? I can't figure it out, murmured Simon Peck piteously. I can, said the journal reporter. This story will be all over town tomorrow. He glanced at me, and I nodded. It'll be all over town, he continued, though not in any of the papers. And I don't believe it's going to hurt Dave Beasley's chances any. Oh, Mr. Peck and his companions turned towards the street, and they went silently. The young man from the quote-unquote journal overtook him. "Thank you for sending me," he said cordially. "You've given me a treat. I'm Fur," in all caps, Beasley. Dowden put his hand on my shoulder, and he had not observed the third figure still remaining. "Well, sir," he remarked, shaking the snow from his coat, "they were right about one thing. It certainly was mighty low down of Dave not to invite me, and you too, to this Christmas party. Let him go to thunder with his old invitations. I'm going in anyways. Come on, I'm plumb froze." Well, there was a side door just beyond the bay window, and Dowden went to it and rang loud and long, and it was Beasley himself who opened it. "What in the name?" he began as a ruddy light fell upon Dowden's face and upon me, standing a little way behind. What are you two? Snowbags? What on earth are you fellas doing out there?" "Well, you come to the Christmas party, you old horse thief." "Yeah, thus, Mrs. Dowden." "Hooray," said Beasley. Dowden turned to me. "Aren't you coming?" "What are you waiting for, old fellow?" said Beasley. And I waited a moment longer, and then it happened. She came out of the shadow, and I knew it, and she went to the foot of the steps, and her cloak falling from her shoulders, she passed me, and I picked it up. Oh, she lifted her arms pleading, though her head was bent with what seemed to be a beautiful sort of shape. She stood there with the snow driving against her and did not speak. Beasley drew his hand slowly across his eyes to see if they were really there, I think. "David," he said at last, "you've got so many lovely people in your house tonight. Isn't there room for just one fool? It's Christmas time." Why don't we go downstairs to the smoky room and try to make sense of what the hell we just read? There you are. Shut up. Sit down. I'm not in the mood for any of this. Light a cigarette. I'm doing this. I'm not doing the bit today. I don't even give a crap. I'll say the word. Oh, damn it. I forgot about the bird. I'm cigarette. There. Now I said it. Okay. This story is supposed to be cute and heartwarming somehow. Starts out with a guy who goes to live in a house for a while because he moved into town to work at a paper, or I don't give a crap. And so then he sees the neighbor is kind of rich and weird, and he talks about it, and there's that whole thing about how I tried to bring it up, then the guy cut me off, and he couldn't shut up about that. I got cut off. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. Whatever. Then he falls in love with the woman, the younger daughter that lives there, and so where's that going? Doesn't go anywhere. Apparently, he's got a crush on her, and that's not going to get settled up in any way, shape, or form. It's just going to be forgotten. She was apparently engaged. The crazy man next door, Mr. Beasley, who's dancing around talking about, imaginary people. He never talked about imaginary people before until he adopted a kid in a wheelchair. Apparently, if you're a kid in a wheelchair, you can't have a real life, so you need to have imaginary people because no one will come see you, I guess, is the message being given here. I don't know. It was weird to begin with. Why is he talking about high jumping friends and whatever? I don't know. Move on. And so then the fiance, the woman, the young girl who lives in the house, she's like, yeah, I was his fiance. He's got no imagination. Well, he's got one now, but she's slowly starting to learn that. And so then finally, also, he's running for politics, but they won't say what party he's in. It's America. You got two parties. It's pretty much always been two parties. I think at one point there's a party called the Know Nothings. Basically what the Trump is now. Just, start your own party called the Know Nothings. And we're just a bunch of jerks and we're racist. I don't know. Anyways, and so, so then, somebody, his opponent, figures out, oh, he's throwing a big party, but no one else is invited because he's so highfalutin, and I'm a man of the soil. And so they're I got the two newspapers in town. I'm bringing both you guys over. We're going to go spy on him so you can, write a piece about how he's just only hanging out with rich people. Come on, let's do it. And of course, he sees him pantomiming, dancing with people and giving a speech, whatever. And then in the end, the woman's oh, he does have an imagination. imagination. He does it for a child. What a saint. And she loves him again. I say all that completely ignoring the intense racism. Like, I've read racist stories in the past. This one was pretty bad. It wasn't like... it was pretty bad. The picture of Dorian Gray talks pretty horribly about Jewish people. Like, a long, long amount of time talking about Jewish people and how they're evil and greedy and whatever. This one didn't go to that extent, but it was still pretty bad. And I found myself having to navigate this sort of speech thing that they were doing, and no matter how nice the character was, he's just this nice person pulling the kid around in a wagon, and he's patiently having to play music for this madman who's got imaginary friends and whatever. But still says the most unflattering things about him and everything, and uses the N-word a ton. I have to think the N-word was also not considered good back then. I don't know. As the president of the United States, could you get up at a podium and just say the N-word back in 1836? I guess you could. I don't know. I haven't seen any record of it. So I imagine, like, in polite society, you shouldn't be saying it. And this author comes from polite society, and he's just throwing it out there all the time. It's ridiculous. And that kind of casts a pall over the whole Christmas theme they're trying to do right here. It was also 2 hours long. I completely misjudged the last two chapters. I saw, these chapters, okay, so we're going to get about halfway. I'm going to do my little commercial, and then I'll wrap it up. It was 2 hours long. 2 hours passed when I did the commercial. I completely misjudged the last two chapters. I am deeply unhappy that this took as long as it did. So, racism, intolerance, mocking crippled children, and that's your Christmas. Well, there you go. So 2023, what a great Christmas, and what a great story to end the year on. So with that, why don't you tuck your children into bed and take hot walnuts that you microwave and put them under their pillows, so when they wake up in the morning, the walnuts be cold, but they can have the cold walnuts and be like, what a great Christmas. And then they'll probably say the N-word. With that, thanks for listening, and I will see you next week. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people. It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people, not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com, which just points you to my link tree. Everything's on the link tree. Just go to the link tree if you want to see where I am. And of course, link tree has the dumbest URL in the world. linktr.ee/nuzzlehouse. It's the dumbest thing. If you go to nuzzlehouse.com, it's just going to reroute you over there after giving you some weird error about it not being secure. I hate it. I hate the internet. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also Just Day and the Curious Mind. We made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly. glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdling or a dork. Now, back to business. Can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.